Hi, my name is Katerina Kolberg and I'm a watercolor illustrator. For almost 10 years, I've been creating illustrations for labels for such big clients like Yoplait, Nora, Tine and Ringnes. Today, I want to share with you some of my industry secrets and I will guide you through my process. We are going to work with a liquor label and illustrate an ingredient of that product. Let's go and check out the task that we received from the client. Here you can see that the client went ahead and took one of my older illustrations and put it just to visualize what they wanted. But they actually needed another plant, which is a walnut branch. And they roughly showed me the area where the branch should be fitted. This is a wonderful explanation because now I totally understand what the client wants. They already gave me the idea of the composition so what they want is the branch which will go from the top to bottom. This is approximately the amount of the nuts of the fruits which they want to be illustrated. And some of the fruits should be opened, as they also informed me in the brief. So we will proceed now to Pinterest and we shall gather some of the reference photos of the walnut tree. So in the search we will put walnut, branch, photo. So as we can see, I think that these search results are not quite accurate. So what I like to do is that I open one image of really what I need, and then I would go into visual search, and then Pinterest would give me exactly what I need. So now I need to find the photos where I can clearly see the fruits. What was also important is to find the right light condition. I want something like this, where basically I can guess that the light just comes from the cloudy sky. I also think that that images like this, when we can see the nut half open, these are amazing. So we absolutely want those. So now I'm looking for the images where I can clearly see fruits and leaves in the right light condition, and I'm gonna go ahead and save them into my folder, so that I will have all the references I need at one place. So now we open our reference photos in the folder and we are ready to proceed to our sketching stage. For my sketching I use just ordinary sketching paper. I like to use mechanical pencil and an eraser. Basically that's all you need. I'm starting to sketch with the direction of the branch, which will go from top to bottom, and I also roughly place the groups of the fruits, because you can see from the references that nuts are often grows with 2 or 3 together. They are sitting together, 2 or 3 on the branch, and I roughly just mark where they could be. When I finished that, I would fill the rest of my space with the leaves. If we look closely on the leaves, we can see that these are usually 5 leaves. The one at the center is the biggest one, and then they get smaller towards the branch. So every time I sketch a plant, it's important that you analyze the shape of the leaves, the number of the leaves, and you kind of understand what is the peculiarity of this plant, so that it would contain the exact features of your exact plant. Some leaf will stretch out here more to the left corner, and probably here on the top left I would also add one more branch of the leaves. When we made a rough sketch and positioned the fruits and the biggest leaves, we can transfer it to another sketching paper and go deeper into the details. So now the sketch is almost ready. And as you can see here, I always show where the light and shadows would be. I think it's very important that when you take references from multiple photos, you still keep in mind that you need to have one light source. Especially on these spherical shaped nuts, it's important that the light comes from one direction and you get all the shadows on one side. As you can see, I decided to keep only 2 of the fruits open. This was through communication with my client. We decided that it would be enough to show only 2 of them and keep the rest closed for now. So when I finished that, I would scan my sketch. For scanning your hand-drawn sketch, you don't need a very advanced scanner, and in some cases you can even use your camera or your phone camera. If you use it correctly, it still can work. And then we open our scanned file in Photoshop, along with the label that I got from the client. This is how it looks, and this is our label. What I do now to speed up my process is that I'm transferring this file to our label. Okay. Yeah, of course it is huge compared to the label size, but I'm going into the multiply mode and I'm going to rescale it. It's important that you keep the same ratio. I'm trying to place it somewhere here, maybe to rotate a bit. So after doing that, I can now see that probably these upper leaves, they stretching too much up, and maybe I should somehow change their position. Since my layer with walnut is in multiply mode now, I'm just using the lasso tool. I'm just cutting the leaves, for example, like that. Layer we are cut, and then I can move them, I can transfer them. This part of my process gives me a lot of possibilities to edit and to perfectly fit the sketch into the area on the label. And this is the final result of the sketch on the label. And this is the branch, which then will be painted in watercolor. For my watercolor paintings, I use hot press cotton paper. It is very smooth, it doesn't have that much of a texture, and it's perfect for scanning afterwards. I use 300 grams paper, just keeps its shape, and I don't get too much waves in the process of the painting. What I'm gonna do is that I will transfer this sketch to my watercolor paper. What I usually do, I just close our curtains so that it's dark in the room, and I would just place my watercolor paper on the screen, and in that way my lines would be visible for me and I could trace the outlines in the very gentle lines, and so that my pencil is not so visible after I paint. I usually paint in this classical botanical style. I use many transparent layers, and my first layer is often to show light and shadows, and afterwards I would just add more and more color into my illustration. Specifically for this illustration, my client asked me to keep this texture of the walnut fruits with these small white dots on it, and I partially did it while I painted them, but partially afterwards, adding some white opaque paint on that. I try always to be attentive to the details, and I also think that giving some imperfections to the painting brings more realism. So now, after the painting is finished, we are going to scan it. To scan the watercolor, you really need a good professional scanner able to distinguish these very light colors. If you would try to do that with your ordinary office scanner, all your light areas will be just replaced with white. I usually scan my images on 400 or 600 dpi. I also turn off any enhancements or any color correction. In this way, I can get just the raw file and I can manipulate the colors myself. After we scanned our illustration correctly, we proceed to Photoshop, where we put them together seamlessly, so we get one illustration. I pretty enjoy the magic wand tool in Photoshop, as I need to remove my white background. As you could see, the label itself was of this beige color. This is why our illustration should have transparent background to be placed nicely on the label. So I'm using the magic wand. But as you can see, there are still some imperfections, like here, for example. If you would add this area, then you would automatically add this area, so you probably should be careful about that. Usually, after picking all my closed areas as well, I would go and invert my selection. And then I would work a bit on the edge of my selection. So I like to add a little bit of feather and just a little bit of smooth. And then okay. And then we cut this selection into a new layer. But there are still some problems with that. So if we put some gray rectangular behind our image, then we would see that the edge is not perfect. So it's not perfect at all. And usually I don't like this imperfection of the edge. This is why we are going to smooth it. And that I would do manually using my vacuum tablet. So I would grab my eraser tool, make it a very small size, approximately 8 or 10 pixels, and then I'm going to go ahead and work on my edge so that it's nice and smooth and it looks good. Yeah, the problem with the magic wand tool is actually it's not that accurate, and sometimes the objects or the edges that for example should be perfectly round, like the nuts themselves or the edge of the leaf, it should be perfectly smooth, but you still see that some of the pixels just stretch out and you want that shape to be perfectly round. You can even fix some problems, like for example here, when the line doesn't seem right. So you can go ahead with the eraser and make the leaves look better, close to perfect. One more feature of Photoshop which I also love is this stamp tool, where if you have some imperfections or maybe in the scanning process, like you see here, you get some strange dust or maybe it was paint, so you just use your stamp tool and you can replace this area and make it nice and smooth, or maybe here, you can also do that. And I continue to work on my file, cleaning the edges and sometimes using stamp tool. So now I like how the illustration looks, and I think that the edge is great now. So let's take a look. So if it will be placed on some light background, it would even look better. I would do some minor adjustments, slightly to the contrast, and so I will bring up slightly the light and dip and darken the shadows just a bit. So now you can see that the knots, they just pop up. But of course, that type of adjustments I would prefer to save as the separate layer so that my client could adjust themselves, maybe if they want this picture to look somewhat differently. And then I'm just saving this file into PSD and normally to PNG as well. This is the file that I'm sending to my clients so that they could print it on the labels. I usually paint the plants in some bigger scale for two reasons. One is that I then can paint every detail, and I have a lot of space there where I can have a lot of possibilities to paint the finest details of the plant, so it looks realistic. But on the other hand, if I deliver the digital file to my client, which is big enough and has high resolution, they will be able to use my illustration for billboards or other large printing formats. The files of the final product, I have a lot of them, and they are all in good quality. This with walnut, it looks like this. So actually for that project, I painted two illustrations. The first one was the walnut, and the second was the silver fir, which was kind of time-consuming, but on the other hand, much fun to paint. So it looks like that. And I'm so happy to see my works going live. It makes me very happy to see how it looks printed on the finished product. I think it's great, and I know that the customers were happy with the result. So if you would like to know more about watercolor technique or how to create the illustration for a food label, follow me on my social medias and we'll stay in touch. And if you need my illustration services, just contact me through Instagram, Facebook or my website, and we can create something beautiful together.